Have you ever wondered why your dialogue sounds great in your head, but it turns out awful on the page?
I thought so.
And the truth is, you're not alone. In fact, I've worked with hundreds of writers, and they all suffer from the same issue: boring dialogue that doesn't pop. So I'm going to show you 3 common dialogue mistakes you're making and how to easily fix them. But first, you need to understand what dialogue actually is. And no, it's not about the words characters say.
You read the Bible, Greg.
It has to do with this. So imagine your dialogue is this salt, and your screenplay is the food that you're going to season. And so you start seasoning it. And if you are hungry and you take a bite, if that's how you salted the food, okay, then all you're gonna taste is salt, and that sucks. Really great food has a variety of seasoning, of which salt might be a part, and similarly, a great script should have a variety of things, of which dialogue should be a part. But writers want to put so much emphasis on dialogue that they forget it's just one part of the seasoning. It's not the whole meal. So here's the bottom line. Like salt on your food, dialogue is an option you can choose to include in your screenplay to tell the story. It's not the only tool. In fact, it's just as important of a storytelling tool as description, slug lines, formatting, plant and payoff, and a host of other tools that you can use to tell the story you want to tell. And nearly every writer I've worked with who asks me, "How can I fix my dialogue?" is often a writer who is overemphasizing dialogue as a tool of storytelling. So what are these 3 mistakes of dialogue you need to delete? Well, the first mistake can be described like this. And once you learn to spot it in your screenplay, it actually looks a lot like this. Frank goes into Greta's office. "Hi, Greta." "Hi, Frank. Good weekend?" "Yeah, it was fine. Went to the lake." "You?" "Stayed home with the kids. Bill's on a fishing trip." "What's up?" "Well, I had a question about the quarterly report." "What about it?" "Did you know Jenkins approved a $2 million purchase order?" "Oh my word, salt everywhere. What is happening?" "I'll tell you what's happening. A whole lot of nothing. Lots of dialogue, which in this case is just a bunch of small talk, and it's spread all over everywhere, and no one reading the script cares about it." But I can hear the screenwriter chirp back, "But it's supposed to sound realistic." "No, it isn't. It's a movie. It's hyper-reality. Dialogue is never supposed to sound realistic in your screenplay. It's supposed to sound authentic to the story you're telling, but not realistic like salt everywhere. And anytime you find these salt piles of small talk, it's all gotta go, because this is really the scene. Frank storms into Greta's office. "Did you know Jenkins approved a $2 million purchase order?" Start there, delete everything else. So any small talk, you can pretty much just straight up remove it. And yes, I hear you in the back, "But what if it's information the audience needs to know?"
Oh, well, allow me to retort.
Well, that's fine, but still, right here, you're gonna delete it because they don't need to know it right now. Exposition is information the audience needs to know only when they need to know it to make sense of the story. And you should give it as late as possible. But if it's in small talk, no way, Skippy, just get rid of it. But what if that exposition is required, but it's not small talk? Well, that brings us to the second dialogue mistake that you need to delete. And it's when you do this. And you're just like, because exposition is part of storytelling. You gotta have it, but you have to do it in creative ways. And you can't give it in expo dumps, like dumping out salt. Okay, so if you're gonna give exposition, don't do it in a way that makes everyone cringe. And the cringe version looks something like this. Frank plops down in Greta's office. "You know Jenkins, tall guy, scar on his left cheek?" "Oh yeah, he coaches his kid's soccer team on the weekends. And he has a drinking problem. I thought he was doing AA. Well, maybe he needs to be. He just approved a $2 million PO. So instead of dumping dialogue all over everything like this, all you're doing is just dumping it all in one spot. Like that. You're spoon feeding the audience, and spoonfuls of salt taste horrible. It's not as messy as the first way, but the food is still ruined. And there are so many better ways to salt your food. But when you just dump the salt, okay, always takes the audience out of the story. And that's the last thing you want. Now, the acronym I use for this is AYABIC. I don't know how you say it. It's just as you and I both know. The characters in this scene are telling each other things that both of them already know, and it's information or exposition solely for the sake of the audience. But worse, it screams amateur writer. So when you need exposition, only dole out what the audience needs to make sense of the story. And you need to make it visual, or you need to couch it in an argument. Perhaps between characters other than Greta and Frank. I mean, what if you had a scene where Jenkins is coaching his soccer team and taking a sip from a pocket whiskey flask, and his wife storms over, takes the flask, and beelines for the car? No words, visuals only. And we get the exact same information. Then, cut to Frank plops down in Greta's office. Jenkins just approved a $2 million PO. Everything else is deleted. It's way better than the original. But then there's the dialogue mistake that's harder to find. Now, once you learn to spot it, your dialogue will take a massive leap forward. It'll be sharper, more elegant, and eventually simpler to write. But first, I need to give you some information that will not only make your dialogue better, but your writing in general will be better. And it's really how many directors and actors break down their scripts. And they do 4 things. 1, they list out the props and important hair, wardrobe, makeup elements the scene requires. 2, they note who the characters are in each scene, and they give each of them a want, a goal they're trying to achieve in that scene. This helps the directors give a one-line motivation for each actor. You're trying to steal the gold. You're trying to stop him. 3, they track the business of each character. What are the characters doing in the scene? And they should be doing something. I mean, yes, you can have scenes where actors are just sitting there talking, but if that's most of your scenes, your script is boring. So make sure each character has some business. And then 4, and this is the money, they assign a motivation for every individual action and every phrase of dialogue. This takes the form of to something. So to put him in his place, to defend herself, to attack him. But here's the critical thing when it comes to your dialogue. In screenplays, one of the cardinal sins is repeating anything. That extends to lines of dialogue and motivations for actions. So if one character's action is to pick up a knife to defend himself, and then he says a line of dialogue with the motivation of to defend himself, that's a no-no. Now you're doing the same thing twice. You're repeating the motivation. And when it comes down to it, the dialogue is what gets cut 99 times out of 100, because most of the time the actor's performance is going to be better than a single line of dialogue. I mean, there are those rare diamonds, but you want dialogue to complement the story. And if you're repeating what the action is already conveying, the dialogue needs to go. In this case, you delete it, you cut it with precision, keeping only what you need. This is actually a similar mistake that people make when writing character descriptions. It's not just reserved for dialogue. Screenwriting is about building a screenplay, being intentional. Every word matters. Not too much, not too little, because the food could be ruined. So take great care. So while you're fixing your dialogue, you should also address your character descriptions, because those are the first impressions a reader has of your characters, and they need to jump off the page. And in this video right here, I walk through a couple of those ways to make those character descriptions awesome, so you can hook readers into your characters as soon as they meet them. And I gotta clean up my mess.